On December 7th, Stephen Guilbeault, Justin Trudeau's Minister of Environment and Climate Change, announced what they call an oil and gas emissions cap. You are going to hear the federal government claim over and over again that this is a cap on emissions. Now, that is a bald-faced lie, and I'm here to tell you not to be fooled by this federal government. This cap doesn't just cut emissions, it will cut production, and it is part of a long-term plan that Stephen Guilbeault has been pursuing for years to shut down and shut in oil and gas production. This production cap will put thousands of Albertans out of work. It is the single biggest existential threat that we have faced as a province since the National Energy Program, and it is time to call a spade a spade. Guilbeault, a former Greenpeace activist, most well known for being arrested scaling the CN Tower to hang a banner.
Greenpeace is climbing the world's tallest building today to tell the world not to be fooled by the Liberal government.
He has his sights set right squarely on Alberta. Now, the production cap is unconstitutional. We know this. Alberta has exclusive constitutional jurisdiction to develop our natural resources. But let's set that aside for a minute and take a deeper look at some of the flaws in what Guilbeault is proposing. First of all, and most importantly, the cap is based on 2019 production levels and makes the assumption that those levels will hold steady. In reality, production in Alberta is already up from the 2019 levels. In 2022, Alberta's total oil production is 6% higher, and natural gas production is 4% higher than 2019. Our forecasts project oil sands production to increase by 22% and for natural gas production to increase by 7% by 2030. Alberta's forecasts are aligned with other major national and international reports. For example, the CER Energy Futures Report and the OPEC World Oil Outlook all forecast continued growth in global oil demand. This means the federal government's assumed production forecast, which form the basis of their cap, are too low, and that Guilbeault's claim that this is an emissions cap and not a production cap is false. Secondly, the cap makes all sorts of assumptions that they describe as technically achievable. They say technically because they know that the technology to abate emissions in the oil and gas sector either don't exist or isn't being developed as fast as they have built into their modeling. The cap accounts for reductions realized through carbon capture, methane reduction, and other technologies all occurring by 2030. These assumptions are baked into their cap. Many of these technologies are supported by Alberta and will eventually deliver real and sustained reductions, but not by 2030. So why would the federal government make assumptions that are unrealistic? Well, because the real goal isn't to reduce emissions, it is to cap production. And when these technologies fail to be in place by 2030, they are banking on being able to shut down and shut in production as an alternative. Finally, Guilbeault's cap-and-trade cap is simply bad policy. Trevor Tombe, an economist and economics professor at the University of Calgary, has described it as, quote, a wedge issue, not an efficient means of lowering greenhouse gas emissions, and a complex way to levy a higher price on one single sector. He's right. In fact, based on 2019 emissions levels, Alberta accounts for 83% of the upper legal limit imposed by the federal government. That means this entire policy, although being presented as a national cap, is once again an attack targeting mostly Alberta. And just as they conveniently excluded home heating oil from the carbon tax, a decision that will benefit Canadians in Atlantic Canada, while hurting Albertans who use cleaner burning natural gas to heat their homes, the federal government is carving out an exemption for refineries, many of which are located where? You guessed it, Ontario and Quebec. So why would the federal government implement bad policy that will fail to reduce emissions? Easy. Because again, it's never been about reducing emissions. S&P Global Commodity Insights noted that if the cap, quote, sets expectations that are too stringent or too inflexible, then it has the potential to negatively impact capital flows. And that is exactly what Guilbeault is trying to do. The oil and gas production cap may not be achievable, and this federal government may even lose the next election before it can be implemented, but by then, the damage will already be done. Investors will look at Canada and decide to take their money and their investments elsewhere, leading to what Guilbeault has always wanted to do: shut down and shut in oil and gas production in Alberta. So what will Alberta do about it? Well, over the coming months, our cabinet and caucus will develop a constitutional shield in response to this and other recent attacks on our province by what is fast becoming one of the most damaging federal governments in Canadian history. Albertans own these resources, and under the Constitution, only we have the exclusive jurisdiction to develop and manage them. Guilbeault has already lost in court twice. He will lose again. There is simply no other option available to us, and Albertans don't support it. If you ask Albertans, or even Canadians, if it makes sense to put in an emissions or production cap that risks hundreds of billions of dollars of investments, the answer is no. If you ask Albertans if they want an emissions cap that means less tax revenues that would otherwise fund healthcare, education, and social programs our families and seniors depend on, the answer is no. If you ask Albertans if they want an emissions cap that threatens the livelihoods and viability of dozens of First Nations communities and municipalities, no. If you ask Albertans if they want an emissions cap that threatens the jobs of hundreds of thousands of hardworking women and men across our province, the answer, again, is no. That's why we cannot and will not let this happen in Alberta.